Former colleague of 22 years called me from his car outside my house and said, "Don't open the door, Gil. Your son-in-law's in there right now." And I just watched him carry out a box of your files. I was standing in the parking lot of Riverside Baptist Church, still holding the funeral program for my brother's memorial service. The paper was damp from where I'd been gripping it too long. I looked at my phone. I looked at the gray November sky over Knoxville. And I thought about how my brother used to say that the ones who smile at your face are the ones you need to watch. I should have listened to him sooner. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, or just type, "I'm here." What happened next changed everything, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why I'm still standing. Quick note, this story includes creative elements for educational purposes, but the lesson underneath it is completely real. My name is Gilbert Haynes. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer, worked on bridges and overpasses across the eastern half of this country, raised 2 kids in the same 4-bedroom house in West Knoxville, and buried my wife Ruth Ann 14 months before any of this started. The grief of losing her was the kind that doesn't leave. It just rearranges itself into the furniture of every room you walk through. My son Kevin lives in Portland. We talk every few weeks. He has his own life, his own kids, and distance has a way of thinning things out even when you don't mean to let it. My daughter Patrice lives 12 minutes from my house. She married her husband, a man I'll call my son-in-law, 8 years ago. His name is Dex. I won't give him more than that. For the first year after Ruth Ann passed, Patrice came over twice a week. She brought food, she sat with me, she helped me sort through her mother's things. I was grateful. I told her so. I told Dex so too, at Thanksgiving, when he shook my hand and said he was glad to be there for family. I should have noticed sooner that his eyes didn't match his words. The morning of my brother Warren's funeral, I drove to the church alone. Warren was 71, gone from a heart attack that nobody saw coming. He and I had grown up sharing a bedroom in a house outside Chattanooga, and losing him felt like losing the last person who remembered who I was before I became a husband, a father, an engineer. Before I became old, I sat in the third pew and tried to hold myself together for the people around me. I shook hands with cousins I hadn't seen in years. I listened to the pastor talk about Warren like he knew him, which he didn't, not really. And when it was over, I walked out into the parking lot and checked my phone. My former colleague, a man named Bernard Cott. We worked together at Whitfield Engineering for most of the 90s and 2000s, had called me twice during the service. He'd also sent a text that just said, "Call me before you go home. It's important." I called him from the car. "Gil." His voice was strange. "Tight. Where are you right now?" "Church parking lot. Warren's service just ended." "What's going on?" "I was driving past your house about 40 minutes ago. On my way to Lowe's, I saw Dex's truck in your driveway." He paused. "I know you were supposed to be at the funeral, so I slowed down. And then I watched him carry a box out of your front door and put it in the back of his truck." I didn't say anything for a moment. A box. A banker's box. The kind with a lid. He went back inside, and I pulled over and waited. He came out again with something that looked like a laptop bag. "Might have been your laptop, Gil." "I don't know." My chest went cold. "Did he see you?" "No. I was parked 2 houses down. I've been sitting here ever since. That's why I called. I didn't want to just leave. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after we hung up. The funeral program was still in my hand. I looked at Warren's photo on the cover. Him at maybe 50, standing on a boat, squinting into the sun and grinning. He always said the worst thing you could do was ignore a bad feeling. Act on it or lose the chance, he used to say. I drove home slowly. Bernard was still parked on the street when I turned onto my block. He climbed out of his car when he saw me and met me at the edge of my driveway. "He left about 15 minutes ago," Bernard said. "He's in his late 60s, barrel-chested, with the kind of face that doesn't hide much." Right then it was showing me something between anger and worry. "I'm sorry, Gil. I didn't know what else to do." "You did right," I said. "Come inside." The house looked normal at first. Living room untouched. Kitchen the same as I'd left it. But when I walked into my home office, the room off the hallway where I kept my filing cabinet, my computer, and the lockbox with Ruth Ann's jewelry and our original deed documents, I knew the filing cabinet drawer was closed but not quite latched. The laptop was gone from the desk, and the lockbox, which I kept on the second shelf of the closet behind a stack of old engineering manuals, was sitting on the floor, still locked but moved. He hadn't gotten into it, but he tried. I sat down in my office chair and tried to breathe evenly. Bernard stood in the doorway. What was in the filing cabinet? Financial records. My will. Power of attorney documents. The deed to this house. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Gil, do you know why he would want those? I thought about the past several months. The questions Dex had started asking. Casual, over dinner. The kind of questions that didn't seem like much at the time. As the house appraised recently. Do you have a financial advisor? Have you thought about what happens to the estate if something happened to you? I'd answered them like a fool. Openly. Like a man who trusted his family. I thought about Patrice. About whether she knew. About whether I wanted to believe she did or didn't. I'm not sure yet, I told Bernard, but I'm going to find out. I didn't confront Dex that day. I didn't call Patrice. That was the hardest part, sitting on it. But 31 years in engineering taught me that the worst decisions are the ones you make when you're upset and underprepared. You don't pull a load-bearing wall without knowing what it's holding up first. That night, in a hotel near the airport, I paid cash, told the desk clerk my name was something simple and common, felt slightly ridiculous doing it. I went through everything I could access from my phone. My main checking account looked fine on the surface. But when I dug into the history, I found a change made 6 weeks earlier. A secondary contact had been added for account alerts. The email address wasn't mine. I didn't recognize it, but when I searched it against Dex's name in my own email archives, I found a thread from 2 years ago where Patrice had CC'd that address on something about a family vacation. It was Dex's secondary email. The one he used for personal stuff. Patrice had said once, he'd added himself to my account alerts without my knowledge. That meant every time money moved, every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer, he was being notified. I opened my brokerage account next. That one took longer. But when I found it, my hands went still. 3 weeks ago, a beneficiary update had been filed. I hadn't filed it. The updated primary beneficiary on my largest investment account was no longer my son Kevin and my daughter Patrice equally. It had been changed to a trust I'd never heard of, with a filing address in Knoxville that turned out, when I looked it up the next morning, to be the same strip mall suite as the accounting firm Dex's cousin operated. He hadn't just been watching my finances, he'd been quietly redirecting them. I didn't sleep. I made lists instead. Evidence I had. Evidence I needed. People I could trust. By 5 in the morning, I had a plan and a very short list of names I was sure of. Bernard Cott was on it. And so was a woman named Josephine Marsh. Josephine had been Ruth Ann's attorney for estate planning. Small firm, sharp mind, the kind of lawyer who remembers every detail and charges accordingly. I'd met with her twice after Ruth Ann passed. She'd been patient with my grief and firm about the paperwork. I trusted her. I called her office when it opened at 8 and left a message. She called back by 9. Mr. Haynes. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Tell me what you have. I told her everything. The laptop. The filing cabinet. The beneficiary change. The account alerts. She was quiet the whole time. The kind of quiet that means someone is taking very precise notes. First thing, she said when I finished, do not go back into that house alone until we've documented the tampering. Second, the beneficiary change can be reversed, but we need to do it through the right channels and document that it was unauthorized. Third, I need you to come in this afternoon so we can go through your estate documents and assess what else may have been altered. What about the police? That depends on what we find. What he did with the beneficiary designation and the account alert, that's potentially financial fraud, elder financial abuse, under Tennessee statute. But I want to see the full picture before we bring law enforcement in, because once you do that, you can't unring the bell. She paused. And Mr. Tide, Haynes, your daughter. Do you think she's involved? I'd been sitting with that question since the night before, turning it over, looking at it from different angles. I don't know, I said honestly. I hope not. What I did next, I'm not proud of in the conventional sense, but I'd do it again without hesitation. I called a security company I'd used years ago to install cameras at a rental property I'd owned. The same technician, a young man named Fletcher who'd since started his own outfit, came out to my house that afternoon while I knew Dex and Patrice were both at work. I let myself in through the back door, which Ruthann and I had always kept on a separate deadbolt that I'd never given anyone else a key to. It was still locked. Dex hadn't found it or hadn't tried it. Fletcher was efficient and quiet. 4 cameras, small and wireless, tucked into places that looked like nothing. The smoke detector housing in the hallway, the corner shelf in the living room, the top of the bookcase in my office, the kitchen, all streaming to an encrypted server in a cloud account with a password I chose standing right there and have never written down. I changed the locks on every door that afternoon, every single one, and I had Fletcher check the window latches while he was at it. When he left, he shook my hand and said, I hope you get what you need, Mr. Haynes. I said, me too. Over the next 10 days, I watched. My daughter had a key to the new locks. I dropped one in her mailbox without explanation. I needed to know whether she'd use it without asking, whether she'd come alone, whether she'd bring him. Day 3. Patrice came by herself. I watched her on the camera feed from the hotel where I was still staying. I'd moved to a different one, closer to Josephine's office. Patrice walked to the living room slowly. She touched the frame of a photo of her mother on the mantel. She stood in my office doorway for a moment, looking at the empty desk where the laptop used to be. Then she sat down in the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea, and cried for about 10 minutes. Quietly. Alone. I almost called her right then. I didn't. I needed to see more. Day 5. Dex came. Not with Patrice. She was at work. I knew her schedule. He used a key. He'd had a copy made from hers, or he'd had one from before. He went straight to my office. Tried the filing cabinet. Locked now. Checked the shelf where the lockbox had been. Opened every desk drawer. He was methodical about it, which was somehow worse than if he'd been frantic. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I could see him talking but not hear through the camera clearly. He left after 20 minutes, empty-handed. Day 7. My son Kevin called from Portland. I answered. Dad, Patrice called me. She said you changed the locks and you've been staying at a hotel and you won't tell anyone why. What's going on? There are some things I'm working through, son. I'll explain soon. She's worried about you. I know she is. I chose my words carefully. Is she the one who called? Or did Dex call you? A pause. Patrice called. Why? Just asking. Give me a week, Kevin. I'll explain everything, I promise. Another pause. Dad, are you okay? I'm being careful, I said. That's different from okay, but it's something. Day 8 was the one that mattered. Dex came back in the evening this time. Later than before. He had a drink in his hand when he walked in. Not something he'd brought, something he'd poured from my kitchen. He sat down in my living room in my armchair, which I'd sat in with Ruthann for 24 years, and he made 2 phone calls. The first one I couldn't quite make out. Short, business-like. The second one was longer, and the audio came through clearly enough. The account change is already in, he said. Once the estate goes to the trust, it's managed through Callaway Advisors. Yeah, that's Roland's firm. He's already set up. A pause while he listened. No, she doesn't know the specifics. She knows we've been looking out for her dad. That's all she needs to know. Another pause. His voice went quieter, the way voices do when someone is smiling. Gil's not getting any younger. He had a knee replacement 2 years ago, and he's been forgetting things. Once we put enough of a record together, missed appointments, confusion, whatever, we push for a power of attorney reassignment. Legally. He laughed at something the other person said. Yeah, I know, but it's cleaner this way. No mess. I saved that recording. I backed it up to 3 separate places. Josephine's secure file system, an encrypted drive I purchased the next morning, and an email I sent to a separate account I'd created specifically for this purpose. Then I drove to Portland. I didn't call Kevin ahead of time. I landed at PDX on a Thursday morning, took a cab to his office near the Pearl District, and waited in the lobby until his assistant told him I was there. He came out looking like a man who'd seen a ghost. Dad, what are you? Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I needed to see your face when I showed you something, I said. Sit down, son. We sat in a small conference room. I played him the recording from day 8. I showed him the beneficiary documents. I showed him the account alert change and the connection to Dex's email. I showed him Bernard's account of what he'd witnessed the day of Warren's funeral. Kevin is 41 years old. He's quieter than his sister. Always has been. Takes after Ruth Ann in that way. Processes things internally before he reacts. He watched and read everything in silence. When it was done, he put both hands flat on the table and looked at the wall for a long moment. Does Patrice know? I don't believe so. I watched her on the camera, Kevin. She came to the house alone and sat in the kitchen and cried. She's not performing that. She might know some of it without knowing all of it. That's what I think too. He told her they were looking out for me. He didn't tell her what that actually meant. Kevin turned to look at me. His eyes were red at the edges. Dad, I should have been more present. After Mom, I told myself you were handling it, that you didn't need me hovering. You're here now. I should have been there. Kevin. I waited until he looked up. I need you to come home. I need you to stand with me and your sister when this comes to a head. Can you do that? He didn't hesitate. Yes. And I need you to call Patrice on the way home. Not about this, just talk to her. Be normal. She needs to hear your voice right now, even if she doesn't know why. He nodded. When does this happen? Saturday, I said. I need her to hear the truth from me before she hears anything else. I didn't confront Dex first. I told Patrice. I drove to her house on Friday evening. Kevin was already back in Knoxville, staying at a hotel near mine. Patrice opened the door and looked at me with the particular combination of relief and hurt that only a daughter can produce. The relief that I was there. The hurt that I'd been gone without explaining. Dad. She stepped back to let me in. I've been so worried. I know. I'm sorry for that. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table. I need to show you something, and I need you to watch the whole thing before you say anything. Can you do that for me? She looked at me for a long moment. Something in my expression must have told her this was serious because she sat down and folded her hands and nodded. I showed her the recording first. I watched my daughter's face as she listened to her husband's voice. I watched the confusion become recognition, and the recognition become something that I don't have the right word for. A specific kind of devastation that comes from finding out someone you trusted was moving pieces around you without your knowledge. Her eyes went wet, but she didn't cry. She held it. When it finished, she said, very quietly, How long has he been planning this? At least a year, by the financial records, I said. Possibly longer. He told me you were getting confused, that you'd been missing appointments, losing things. Her jaw tightened. He said we needed to be prepared in case you needed more support. I've been sharp as I've ever been. My doctor can confirm that. She pressed her fingers over her mouth, stared at the table. The Callaway firm. That's Roland's company. Roland is Dex's college roommate. Yes, he was going to steal from you. She said it plainly, not a question. He was going to reroute everything through a trust he controlled, with his friend managing it, in a way that would have been very difficult to unwind once it was done. The silence stretched. Outside her kitchen window, her neighbor's kids were riding bikes up and down the sidewalk in the last of the evening light. Normal sounds. Normal world. "What do you need me to do?" Patrice asked. I reached across and put my hand over hers. "I need you to let me handle the next part, and I need you to trust that I'm protecting you too, not just myself. Whatever happens to him legally, you're not in this. You didn't know. I should have known. Maybe. But you trusted your husband. That's not the same thing as complicity." She looked up. "Kevin's here, isn't he? He flew in yesterday." Something crossed her face, grief and relief and something softer underneath. "Good," she said. "That's good." The confrontation happened on a Saturday afternoon in my living room. Josephine had coordinated with a detective from the Knox County Financial Crimes Unit, a thorough, soft-spoken woman named Detective Arnett Castle, who had apparently been dealing with elder financial abuse cases for 11 years and had the calm efficiency of someone who has seen all the ways people can disappoint each other. I invited Dex over under the pretense of talking about some estate planning questions I had. He came in with the ease of a man who believed he had the situation well in hand. He was wearing a fleece vest and carrying a cup of coffee he picked up on the way. He smiled at me in the doorway. "Gil, good to see you up and around." "Patrice has been worried." "I know. Come in." I led him to the living room. He stopped when he saw Kevin standing by the window. "Kevin." Something shifted in his face, just briefly. "Didn't know you were in town." "I came in for Dad," Kevin said. His voice was even. Dex looked around. He registered that Patrice wasn't there. I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. But he sat down, because what else could he do? He didn't know what I had. He thought he was still the one holding the information. "I want to talk about the beneficiary change on my investment account," I said. "The one filed 3 weeks ago. The one I didn't authorize." His expression went careful. "I'm not sure what you mean." I connected my phone to the television. I played the recording from day 8. I watched him listen to his own voice. His jaw tightened. He set his coffee cup down very slowly. When it finished, he looked at me with an expression that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite fear. It was the look of someone recalibrating, that's taken out of context. "Which part?" Kevin said from across the room. "All of it. Gil, you've been under a lot of stress. The grief, the isolation. Sometimes things look more sinister than they are." "I have the beneficiary change documents," I said. "I have the account alert added under your email. I have Bernard Cott's testimony about what he witnessed the day of my brother's funeral, and I have my attorney, who has already filed the paperwork to reverse every financial change made to my accounts without my authorization." Dex looked at his hands. Something moved through him. I could see it. The moment when the architecture of a plan you've built starts to show its cracks. "I was trying to protect the family's assets without my knowledge," I said, "without my consent. Under a trust you would control. With your college roommate managing the money." "Dex." Patrice's voice came from the hallway. He turned. She was standing in the doorway. She'd been there for the last several minutes, I knew. I'd asked her to wait until I got to the end. "Patrice." He stood. "Let me explain. I heard the recording," she said. "All of it." Her voice was very steady. "She doesn't know the specifics. She only needs to know we're looking out for her dad." She looked at him for a long moment. "That was me you were talking about." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. The front door opened. Detective Castle came in with a uniformed officer. She introduced herself to Dex without particular drama, the way people do when they've done something many times, and the formality of it has become just the shape of the work. "Mr. Dex Brower," she said, using his last name, now the same way I'd avoided it until this moment. "I have some questions for you about several financial transactions and account changes that appear to have been made without the account holder's authorization. I'd like you to come with me." He looked at me. His expression had gone somewhere I recognized. It was the look of a man who understood, finally, that the ground had shifted while he was standing on it. "You'll regret this," he said. "Family doesn't do this to each other." "You stopped being family," I said, "when you decided I was more useful to you as an asset than as a person." They walked him out. The room went quiet in the way rooms do after something large has moved through them. Kevin came and stood beside me. Patrice hadn't moved from the doorway. After a moment, she crossed the room and put her arms around me, and I held my daughter in my living room while the light through the windows went long and gold. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said into my shoulder. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I should have seen it. He made sure you didn't. That's who he was." I held on. "I'm just glad you know now. I'm glad we're all here." Kevin put his hand on my back without saying anything, which was exactly right. The legal process took about 4 months. Dex was charged with financial elder abuse, unauthorized account access, and attempted fraud under Tennessee statute. His attorney tried several approaches, that I'd been confused, that the account changes were administrative errors, that the recording was inadmissible. Josephine, who I had come to think of as the most effective person I'd ever hired, dismantled each argument methodically and without visible satisfaction, which somehow made it worse for them. He was convicted on 2 of the 3 counts. Sentenced to 18 months and ordered to pay restitution, the trust through Callaway Advisors was dissolved before it ever became operational. Roland, his college roommate, faced a separate inquiry through the State Financial Regulatory Board. All my account changes were reversed. Everyone. The deed to my house stayed in my name, the way it had been since Ruthann and I bought it in 1993. Patrice filed for divorce the week after the conviction. She cried a lot in those months, not in front of me, but I knew. Kevin called her every few days from Portland. I drove over on Sunday afternoons and we had dinner together, just the 2 of us, sometimes talking and sometimes not. She started seeing a therapist in January. She started sleeping better by February. Bernard Cott came over for dinner in the spring. We sat on the back porch, and he told me he'd almost just driven past that day. Almost told himself it was none of his business. "What made you stop?" I asked him. He thought about it. "Ruthann," he said finally. "I kept thinking about how she would have wanted someone to stop. I didn't have anything to say to that. We just sat there for a while with our drinks, watching the yard go dark. What I know now that I didn't fully understand before is this. The people who want to take from you are counting on your trust. They get close during the grief, during the illness, during the transitions, the moments when you're most open, most in need, most likely to hand the keys to anyone who seems to be reaching out a hand. And sometimes they are reaching out a hand, but sometimes they're reaching for something behind you. I'm 67 years old. I'm not naive about getting older. My knees aren't what they were. I look at the stairs differently than I used to. I know that the years ahead are fewer than the years behind. But I earned those years. I spent them honestly, and I'm not going to hand them over to someone who saw my loss and decided it was an opportunity. The lesson I want to leave you with is this. Check your accounts. Know what's in your name and what's been changed without your knowledge. Have an attorney who works for you, not for your family's plans for you. And pay attention to the people around you who ask more questions about your finances than about how you're actually doing. And find yourself a Bernard Cott. Someone who slows down when something looks wrong. Someone who stays parked on the street for 40 minutes because they can't bring themselves to just drive away. That kind of person is worth more than anything that was ever in that filing cabinet. I still go to the cemetery on Sunday mornings. I park in the same spot, walk the same path. I talk to Ruthann about the week, about Kevin's kids, about how Patrice is doing, about the small and ordinary things that make up a life. I told her about all of this, start to finish, over the course of several Sundays. Last week I told her I was okay. Not just careful. Actually okay. Not just careful. Actually okay. I think she'd have been glad to hear it. Drop it too in the comments if you made it all the way to the end. I'd love to know you were here, and if this story spoke to you, If it reminded you of something or someone or made you pick up the phone to check in with someone you love, then it did what it was supposed to do.